I'd like to call this meeting here in Newark City Council to order. Autumn, please call the roll.
Mr. Marmee? Mr. Rath?
Here.
Mr. Valletta?
Here.
Mr. Blake?
Here.
Mr. Bub?
Here.
Mr. Koss?
Here.
Mrs. Floyd?
Here.
Mr. Frazier?
Here.
Ms. Hall?
Here.
And Mr. Johnson?
Here. We have 9 present this evening. Next on the agenda is the invocation by Mr. Johnson, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Johnson, whenever you're ready.
Again, before we pray, you may have some personal things you'd like to say about, and please do that, and then we'll continue with the prayer. Lord, we thank you for the beautiful days of summer. We ask you for your blessing and encouragement on those who have faced flooding, tornadoes, and wildfires. Be with us in our deliberations and guide our leaders in the world, the nation, the state, the county, and the city. And be with those in need. Be with those who experience tragedy. And be with those who experience joy and well-being. And may we know your will to carry out our duties. And we ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen. William, you want to help me with the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you both. Next on the agenda, we have caucus. That's time for council to discuss anything that may change in the agenda this evening. Do we have anything?
Make a motion to excuse Mr. Marmee.
Motion by Mrs. Floyd to excuse Mr. Marmee. Second. Second by Mr. Rath. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That passes. Do we have anything else for caucus? Next on the agenda, we have the minutes of our July 18th, 2016 council meeting. Is there a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Johnson, second by Mr. Rath. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes. Thank you. We have 3 reports this evening from standing committees, one from finance, one from service, and one from street. Without objection, those will be received and filed. We have 1 report this evening from our city officials. We have one from Barb Jobs, the income tax administrator, the income tax revenue report for the period ending July 15th, 2016. Without objection, that'll be received and filed. Under communications, we have 3 this evening. 2 from the Ohio Division of Liquor Control, an application for, not sure what that is, at 1150 Mount Vernon Road, and another one for the transfer request from Newark Foods LLC to MK of America Inc., and one from Teresa Motes, an email to members of council inviting them to the National Night Out on August 2nd. Without objection, those will be received and filed. Next on the agenda, excuse me, we have comments from citizens. There's 2 sections for comments from citizens. One is now and one is after the legislation. This is not a debate with council. This is just an opportunity for you to come up and be heard. We have anyone this evening? Mr. Butcher.
My name is William Butcher, 263 Union Street. Let me just say, I just made, just came here tonight to say I still like to see Union Street paved. And when I look at, that street is in one bad shape. I've been hitting potholes after potholes. But I'd like to see something done about it. And here a couple of nights ago, there was a couple of emergency vehicles going right to the intersection. People not stopping. And my concern is people speeding on Union Street. Burnt tires, squawking tires, and I did make made the office, which I did fine, and I'm just say I'm private, and I just say it's double 10 forecast should be money clear tonight, low 67, tomorrow high about 83. Chance of rain I can't run right now. But we think we give them next chances of rain by middle of next week. I'll get you double 10 weather forecast.
Thank you, Wade. Anyone else for this first section of citizens' comments? Okay. Next, we have ordinances on the second reading, 16-30.
Ordinance 16-30 by Mr. Raff, Mr. Cost, Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Johnson, an ordinance annexing certain territory generally described as being approximately 2 acres, more or less, located in Newark Township to the city of Newark, Ohio.
You've heard the second reading of 16-30. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Rath?
make a motion to adopt ordinance 16-30.
Motion by Mr. Rath. Second. Second by Mr. Frazier. Do we have any discussion on 16-30? Seeing none, I'll please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Marmee? Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Roletta?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cost?
Yes.
Mrs. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
yes,
And Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
16-30 passes 9-0. Next, we go to ordinances on the first reading, 16-31.
Ordinance 16-31 by Mr. Raff, Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Cost, Mr. Johnson, an ordinance establishing a backflow prevention program within the city of Newark and establishes uniform regulations for the protection of public health in conformity with all applicable laws.
16-31 will be held for 2 weeks for a second reading. Next, we go to resolutions on the second reading, 16-61.
Resolution 16-61 by Mr. Marmee, Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Cost, Mr. Raff, Mr. Johnson, a resolution appropriating monies for the current expenses of the municipal corporation.
You've heard the second reading of 16-61. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mrs. Floyd?
make a motion to adopt Resolution 16-61.
Motion by Mrs. Floyd, second by Mr. Johnson. Is there any discussion on 16-61? Seeing none, I'll please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Marmee, Mr. Raff,
Yes.
Mr. Roletta,
Yes.
Mr. Blake,
Yes.
Mr. Bub,
Yes.
Mr. Cost,
Yes.
Mrs. Floyd,
Yes.
Mr. Frazier,
Yes.
Ms. Hall,
yes,
and Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
16-61 passes 9-0. And next, we have resolutions on the first reading, 16-65.
Resolution 16-65 by Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Cost, Mr. Raff, Mr. Johnson. A resolution appropriating monies for the current expenses of the municipal corporation.
16-65 will be held for 2 weeks for a second reading. And that concludes our legislation this evening. I'm not sure you got your money's worth tonight. That was a pretty quick one. Next is our second opportunity for comments from citizens. Do we have anyone who would like to speak? This young man here, and Mr. Crawford, you want to speak?
My name is Michael Hill, 211 North Buena Vista Street, and I just wanted to express gratitude for the work around downtown and construction and stuff. I know that there have been recent criticisms about the construction, and I just wanted to say, as a small business owner and nonprofit director in the area, really appreciate the work and stand with you guys as you face fire and criticism from closing businesses and other people who aren't getting their way. So thank you for doing what's right and maybe not what's popular. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Crawford? Anyone else like to speak?
Daniel Crawford, 163 South 2nd Street. I'll be very brief. My kids are quite happy with the pace of the meeting so far, so I don't want to make it even longer. So I just wanted to rise up, and I was hoping Mr. Marmee would be here. That's why I didn't speak during the first opportunity, but just wanted to clarify, when I spoke 2 weeks ago about the whole privatization of fire, I didn't mean that housing insurance would have to be the only way of paying for it. There are obviously a number of ways you can think of to pay for it. A few would come to mind if I put my mind to it, but I just wanted to reiterate my opposition to even the thought of that. Anyways, speaking of paying for things, I want to announce how happy I am to hear that our measure that we circulated with the 99% to try and put an initiative on the ballot to help give the citizens of Newark a chance to vote, or whether they think the Constitution should be amended to clarify that money isn't speech and that only individual human beings should be recognized as persons with legal rights by the Constitution. We got enough signatures to get that on the ballot so the people of Newark will have a chance to vote on it. So with that, thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. David? Anyone else? Okay.
David Green, 1791 Olympic Court, Newark. I just had a question for council about the failure to itemize certain items on the agenda and about that practice in terms of the value to people who come to city council meetings for the first time, saying that monies for the current expenses of municipal corporation doesn't tell anybody very much at all. And it could be misinterpreted a lot of different ways. So the question is, why aren't these items itemized on the agenda?
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mike Hill again, and I thought that was curious as well. I'll second that. And maybe it's just because I wasn't here at previous meetings or haven't looked into it enough, but also I thought there could have been more detail in the explanation of annexing certain territory, just about where that was in general. But I agree with his comments. Thank you.
We'll discuss that. Mr. Butcher?
Hi, it's Wayne Butcher, 263 Union Street. I decided to let you know I did make a, I did make a, what was the name of that? I did make the, forget,
You're on the board?
huh? Yeah, I'm on the board, and I thought I'd let you know my first meeting is Tuesday, August 16th. Guess what? That passed.
Thank you, William. Any city officials this evening? Our auditor, Mr. Johnson. I'll pass. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Our law director, Sassen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will pass.
Mayor Hall.
Just a quick thank you for everyone that volunteers and helped out. We had the Ohio Flags of Honor this weekend in front of Cherry Valley School. It was a wonderful tribute and memorial to fallen heroes in the fight against terrorism from Ohio, and a gentleman did that. His son passed away, only child, with Lehman Company, and so it kind of motivated him to do this. And so the Friendship Club of Lincoln County, the Veteran Service Organization, and a whole lot of other volunteers put that on. It was a great event over the weekend and a great way to honor those. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Rath.
Call a service committee meeting, and with that I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Rath. Mr. Roletta.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll pass.
Mr. Blake.
I'll pass, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. The newly married, Mr. Butler.
Gladly pass. Thank you.
Mr. Goff.
I will pass also.
Mrs. Floyd.
I'll call Finance Committee for Mr. Marmee, and I'll pass.
Mr. Frazier.
I don't think I can pass, you know.
You could.
I don't think I can. I'm just very excited for the commercial development that's going around the town. That newspaper article really highlights the progress that we're making in our community. And to have additional businesses comes with it additional opportunity to increase the quality of life and the welfare of our community. And so with more competition in wages, offers the ability to have higher wages and have people with dependents and families really be able to care for each other and have health insurance and adequate food and shelter that comes with that. So I like the progress that our city is going in, and I commend the mayor and the economic development director and the administration for the progress that we're making, as well as this council. So I look forward to continue working with you and continue to make progress. With that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier. Ms. Hall.
Thank you. I will pass.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Mr. Johnson.
An opportunity.
Here's your opportunity.
Yeah, we didn't all say anything.
Here's your opportunity.
Well, first of all, I want to say I think we have a great city, and we do a lot of great things. And as you all know, initially I voted against the income tax raise, and I wanted to explain my vote. It wasn't because I am not for it, because I'm very much for it. It was because I didn't really believe that it could pass in November when we have presidential and everything else, and the people who, I have to say this, people who come are more interested in what happens on the national level than what happens in the city level. And unfortunately for them, what happens in the city level impounds their life considerably more than what happens at the national level. So I'm very much for it, and I will do everything I can to see that it becomes effective, and I'll help in any way I can. With that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Green and Mr. Hill, I will look into that comment you have about the agenda. I think we have kind of slipped away from that a little bit. We used to do that a little better, so we'll have a conversation. We'll have a conversation about that one. Again, I'd like to thank everyone here for coming this evening. Our next committee meeting is August 8th at 5:30 here in this room. Our next full council is 2 weeks from tonight, the 15th at 7 p.m. Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion by Mr. Rath, second by Mr. Johnson. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We're adjourned.